Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Ruelas told Margaret Joseph's son, "I'm the guy you need to worry about." Margaret Josephs has been trying to keep her kids out of the drama, but it's a little too late, thanks to Ruelas. Teresa Giudice's controversial hubby was accused of calling Margaret's son and threatening him over the phone, and she recently shared more details about that. Now that the Real Housewives of New Jersey season 14 is over, Margaret is spilling the tea on Lewis's behavior. While naysayers have called out the 57-year-old for not publicly showing proof of her claims against Lewis, she's clapped back. Most recently, Margaret revealed that the network saw all the proof they needed, and they know that she spoke facts. The RHONJ star shared even more details during another interview, this time on the Juicy Scoop podcast, about how the conversation went between Lewis and her son. She also noted that the authorities were called after the threatening phone call and that a police report was filed. However, Margaret is intent on keeping her son's identity private, so if you go digging for the records, you likely won't find them, and you'll find out why as you read further. What Ruelas said to her son during the controversial phone call was revealed by Margaret Josephs. A call was made to his office, asked for him by name, and a threat was made to him, she told Heather McDonald during a chat. There was a conversation, it wasn't just a phone call. Margaret's son told the caller, "I see your phone number," and the person responded, "Oh, wrong number," and then hung up. After that, he Googled the number and got the information, which is how Margaret later learned Lewis was behind it. As for the specifics of the threat, the RHONJ star noted it was not like, "I'm gonna kill you." Nothing remotely like that, just like, "I'm the guy you have to worry about." After finding out it was Lewis, Margaret said they called NBC to update the network on what was going on, and the police also came to their home. Everyone's trying to look up the police reports. They were filed in a very specific way. They're not going to be made public, added Margaret. The RHONJ star had another bone to pick with Lewis this season when he wished suffering on her son. He later issued a backhanded apology, which garnered criticism, and much like everyone else who read it, Margaret wasn't impressed. "That's not an apology," she exclaimed. "He was trying to save himself, and that's not an apology, and I think it just speaks to his character of who he is to just say something like that." Ruelas stood across from Margaret Joseph's son, his broad shoulders rigid and his expression intense. The room was filled with a palpable tension that seemed to thicken with every passing second. What had started as a casual meeting had escalated into something far more personal and menacing. Margaret's son, a sharp-witted young man who had grown up surrounded by the chaos of reality TV drama, knew confrontation well. But Lewis was different. He was older, more calculated, and his eyes held a darkness that was unsettling. Lewis took a step forward, his gaze never leaving Margaret's son. "You know who I am?" he asked, his voice low, almost conversational. Margaret's son met his eyes without flinching. "Yeah," he replied, his tone cool, but there was an edge to it, a flicker of defiance that Lewis couldn't ignore. Lewis smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then you know I'm the guy you need to worry about." The room seemed to grow colder. Margaret's son, though outwardly composed, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had heard about Lewis, stories whispered in circles, rumors about his past, his business dealings, the way he operated. Lewis wasn't just another reality star. He was a man who played dirty, and there were layers to him that few people understood. But Margaret's son wasn't about to back down. "You think I'm worried about you?" He shot back, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've dealt with worse." Lewis chuckled softly, his eyes narrowing. "Worse?" "No, kid, you haven't dealt with worse. You've dealt with loud mouths, People who want attention, who scream and shout to get their way. That's not me. I don't need to raise my voice to make my point. There was something about the calmness in Louis' voice that made it even more threatening. It wasn't just the words he spoke, it was the weight behind them, the unspoken warning. Louis didn't need to threaten anyone outright. His mere presence was enough to make it clear that he was not someone to be crossed. Margaret's son stood his ground, refusing to show the fear that was creeping into his mind. "I'm not scared of you," he said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. Louis tilted his head slightly, studying him. "Maybe not yet," he said, his voice eerily calm. "But you will be." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's son could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been one to shy away from a fight, but this was different. This wasn't just about some petty argument or a disagreement over something trivial. This was Louis Ruelas, a man whose reputation preceded him, a man who played by his own rules. Louis took another step closer, closing the gap between them. "You know, people like you, people who think they can handle anything, you remind me of myself when I was younger. Cocky. Full of it. Thinking the world revolves around you and nothing can touch you." Margaret's son bristled at the comparison. "I'm nothing like you." Louis raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smirk. "No, we'll see about that. You see, when push comes to shove, everyone thinks they're strong until they realize they've been playing the wrong game. You've been playing checkers, kid, but I'm out here playing chess. And I don't lose." The way Louis spoke was unnerving. His voice was steady, measured, as if he had already played out this entire scenario in his head and knew exactly how it would end. Margaret's son didn't know if he was bluffing, or if this was all part of some twisted mind game, but it didn't matter. He had to stand firm. He had to prove that he wasn't afraid, even if his instincts were screaming at him to back off. "You don't scare me," Margaret's son said again, but the words felt hollow now. Louis leaned in, his face inches from his. "You should be," he whispered. "Because when you mess with me, you're not just messing with some guy off the street. You're messing with someone who knows how to get things done. And I don't care how it looks, who gets hurt, or what I have to do to protect what's mine." Margaret's son swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what Louis was hinting at, but he could feel the menace in his words. This wasn't just about a disagreement or some personal vendetta. Louis was making it clear that he was willing to do whatever it took to come out on top. "You're going to regret this," Louis said, his voice still soft but filled with a chilling certainty. "Because I'm not like the rest of them. I don't just make threats. I make promises. And when I say I'm the guy you need to worry about, I mean it." Margaret's son clenched his fists at his sides, his mind racing. He had seen people like Louis before, people who thrived on intimidation, who thought they could bully their way through life. But this felt different. Louis wasn't just trying to scare him. He was laying the groundwork for something far more dangerous. "I'll be watching you," Louis said, straightening up and adjusting his collar, as if the conversation hadn't just taken a dark turn. "And when the time comes, you'll understand exactly what I mean." Without another word, Louis turned and walked away, leaving Margaret's son standing there, his heart pounding and his mind reeling. He had been in confrontations before, but this one felt like a warning, a prelude to something bigger. Louis Ruelas wasn't just some guy trying to pick a fight. He was a man with power, influence, and the kind of quiet, dangerous energy that made him a force to be reckoned with. And now Margaret's son realized he had just stepped into Louis' crosshairs. As the door closed behind Louis, the silence that followed was thick with unease. Margaret's son let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his mind replaying Louis' words over and over again. "I'm the guy you need to worry about." And for the first time in a long time, Margaret's son wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming next.